The colony ship Persephone drifted through the cold darkness between stars for 300 years. Inside its metal walls, 12,000 humans slept in frozen chambers, dreaming of nothing at all. They did not know that their ship had become famous across the galaxy. They did not know that alien races watched their slow journey with confusion and doubt. Ambassador Kethril of the Dominion Council stood before a massive viewing screen. His gray skin pulled tight over sharp bones as he studied the human vessel. Behind him, representatives from 18 different species whispered among themselves. "They are still coming," Kethril said. His voice carried the weight of deep concern. 300 of their years and they have not turned back. "Why would they turn back?" asked Commander Vasna, a tall being with scales that shifted color with her mood. Right now they were deep purple, showing her irritation. "They sleep. They do not know what awaits them." "But we sent warnings. We told them the planet was dying." Vasna made a sound like rocks grinding together. "Humans do not listen. Everyone knows this." The planet in question was called Karath 7 by the Dominion. It sat at the edge of explored space, a world that had once been green and full of life. Now it was brown and gray. The soil had turned to dust. The waters had become poison. A failed mining operation by the Velox Corporation had stripped the world of everything valuable and left nothing but ruin. The Velox had come to Karath 760 years before the human ship launched. They had found rich deposits of minerals beneath the surface. They had drilled and dug and blasted their way through the planet's crust. When the easy resources were gone, they packed up their equipment and left. They did not care about the damage they had done. Profit was all that mattered to the Velox. The humans called this planet New Eden. They had named it before they knew what it had become. They had seen telescope images of a blue and green world with oceans and forests. Those images were 3 centuries out of date. The world they were flying toward no longer existed. "What do they bring?" asked a small creature near the back of the council chamber. This was Merchant Thipka of the Nessari trading clans. His many eyes blinked in different patterns as he waited for an answer. Kethril checked his data tablet. "According to our scans, they carry 12,000 colonists in stasis. They have construction materials, medical supplies, and—" He paused, his thin lips pressing together. "And what?" Vasna demanded. "Seeds. They carry seeds. Millions of them, for plants, for food crops, for trees. They also carry frozen embryos of earth animals, fish, birds, insects." Kethril shook his head slowly. "They brought an entire ecosystem to a dead world." The council chamber fell silent. Every species present understood what this meant. The humans had left their home planet 3 centuries ago with hope in their hearts. They had packed everything they would need to build a new civilization, and all of it was useless now. "We should intercept them," said Vasna. "Wake them up, tell them the truth, redirect them to a habitable world." "That would require Dominion resources," Thipka pointed out. "Who would pay for such a rescue? The humans have no credits, no standing with the Council. They are primitives playing at space travel. Their technology is crude. Their lifespans are short. They breed too quickly and think too slowly." "They will die," Kethril said quietly. "Yes," Thipka agreed. "They will. It is unfortunate but not our concern. The Dominion has more important matters to attend to." The debate continued for many hours. Representatives argued about responsibility and resources. Some felt sympathy for the humans. Others felt nothing at all. In the end, the council decided to do nothing. They would allow the human ship to reach Karath 7. They would document what happened next. Perhaps it would serve as a warning to other young species who tried to expand beyond their capabilities. "Post observers in orbit," Kethril ordered. "I want to know everything that happens on that planet. This is an opportunity to study human behavior under extreme stress." The others agreed. If the humans were going to die, at least their deaths could provide useful data. The Persephone landed on a gray morning under a sky the color of old bruises. The colonists woke slowly from their long sleep, their minds foggy and their bodies weak. 300 years in stasis had taken a toll. Muscles had atrophied despite the best medical technology. Minds had dulled from centuries of nothing. Captain Sarah Chen was among the first to stand on her own feet. She was 62 years old by the calendar, though only 42 in terms of time actually lived. She had been one of the youngest officers selected for the mission. Now she was the senior commander of 12,000 souls. She walked to a viewport and looked out at her new home. The landscape was empty. Bare hills rolled away toward distant mountains. No trees, no grass, nothing green at all. The ground looked like ash. A wind blew across the surface, carrying dust that scraped against the ship's hull. "Captain," said her first officer, a young man named James Rivera. His face was pale, his hands were shaking. "The atmospheric readings, they're not what we expected." Sarah took the tablet from his hands. She read the numbers 3 times before she accepted what they meant. The air was breathable but thin. The oxygen levels were lower than Earth normal. The water sources were contaminated with heavy metals and toxic compounds. The soil pH was wrong for almost every crop they had planned to grow. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough that our original plans won't work. The terraforming timeline we projected. It's not realistic anymore. We planned for 50 years to make this world habitable. Now," James stopped, unable to continue. "Now what?" "Now our best estimates say 200 years, minimum, if we survive that long." Sarah looked back out the viewport. Somewhere out there, she could see dust devils spinning across the barren ground. This was supposed to be a paradise. This was supposed to be humanity's second chance. Earth was dying when they left, choked by pollution and overpopulation. They had been the lucky ones, chosen from millions of volunteers to start over on a new world. Now that new world was dead. "Get me the department heads," she said. "All of them. We need to figure out what we can actually do." The meeting lasted for 2 days. Scientists argued with engineers. Farmers shouted at geologists. Everyone had opinions about what had gone wrong and who was to blame. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, head of the agriculture department, spread her hands on the conference table. "The soil samples are a disaster. Cadmium, lead, mercury, arsenic. The Velox mining waste has contaminated everything within 300 kilometers of the original extraction sites." "Then we farm somewhere else," suggested Marcus Webb, the chief engineer. "There is nowhere else. The contamination has spread through the groundwater. The whole planet is affected to some degree." "What about hydroponics?" James asked. "We brought equipment for that." "Hydroponics can feed maybe 2,000 people long-term," Yuki said. "We have 12,000, and the systems will break down eventually. Parts will fail. Without soil, we have no future." The arguments went round and round, but Sarah noticed something else happening too. Between the arguments, people were already adapting. The hydroponics team had started testing which seeds might survive in modified growing conditions. The water treatment specialists were designing new filtration systems. The soil experts were talking about bacteria that could break down toxins. Nobody talked about giving up. Nobody suggested they climb back into the ship and fly away to die in the darkness between stars. They argued about how to survive, not whether to try. On the 3rd day, Sarah addressed all 12,000 colonists in the main cargo bay. They stood packed together, tired and scared and far from the Earth they would never see again. Children clung to their parents. Old people leaned on younger ones. Everyone looked at Sarah with the same desperate hope. "I won't lie to you," Sarah said, her voice carrying through the amplification system. "This is not what we hoped for. This world has been damaged. It will take longer than we planned to make it our home. Some of you might not live to see it become what we dreamed." The crowd was silent. A child near the front started to cry, and her mother picked her up. The sound of that crying seemed to fill the entire bay. "But we are human beings, and human beings do not give up. Sarah's voice grew stronger. Our ancestors survived ice ages with nothing but fire and animal skins. They crossed oceans in wooden boats, not knowing if they would ever see land again. They built cities in deserts. They found ways to live in places that should have killed them. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. We will do the same. We will plant our seeds in dead soil and make it live again. We will clean the water and heal the land. This world does not know what we are capable of, but it will learn. Every generation before us faced impossible odds, and every generation found a way forward. We will not be the generation that gives up. A man near the back started clapping, then another, then dozens more. The sound built until the entire cargo bay was thundering with applause. People were crying and hugging each other. For a moment, just one moment, the fear was gone. Sarah stepped down from the platform and found James waiting for her. "Do you really believe we can do this?" he asked quietly. Sarah thought about her grandmother, who had grown tomatoes in a tiny apartment with no sunlight, using mirrors and patience and love. She thought about the seeds waiting in the cargo hold, millions of tiny promises wrapped in hard shells. She thought about the children who had been born on this ship, who had never known Earth, who deserved a chance to grow up under an open sky. "I believe we have to try," she said. "That's what humans do. We try until we succeed or until we die trying. There is no other option." The first year was harder than anyone expected. The colonists built shelters from their ship's cargo containers, cutting them apart and welding them into simple structures. They set up filtration systems for the poisoned water, running it through layers of sand and charcoal and synthetic membranes. They constructed greenhouses with artificial light because the sun was often hidden behind clouds of dust. Many of the seeds they planted died. The soil was too toxic. The water was too acidic. The temperature swings between day and night were too extreme, but some seeds survived. A few stubborn varieties of wheat that had been bred for harsh conditions, some hardy vegetables that could tolerate poor soil, and one small apple tree that refused to give up. Sarah visited that apple tree every day. She watched it struggle against the harsh environment, dropping leaves and growing new ones, fighting for every inch of height. It reminded her of the colonists themselves. The Dominion observers watched from orbit and recorded everything. They expected to document a tragedy. Instead, they witnessed something they did not understand. The humans kept planting seeds. Even when they failed, they planted more. They mixed earth bacteria into the dead soil, organisms designed to break down toxins and add nutrients. They bred new strains of plants through rapid selection, saving seeds only from the strongest survivors. They worked 18-hour days and fell asleep covered in gray dust and woke up to do it all again. "They should have surrendered by now," Vasna reported to the council. "Their food supplies from the ship will run out within 2 years. Their crops are barely producing, and yet they continue." "What drives them?" Kethriel wondered. "It cannot be logic. Logic says they should accept defeat." No one in the council had an answer. The alien species of the Dominion had encountered humans before, in brief trading contacts and diplomatic exchanges. They knew humans were emotional creatures, prone to irrational decisions, but this level of persistence was beyond anything they had expected. "Perhaps they are simply too stupid to know they are beaten," Thipka suggested. But Kethriel was not so sure. He had been watching the human activity patterns carefully. They were not acting randomly. Their efforts were coordinated and systematic. They were learning from their failures and adjusting their approaches. This was not stupidity. This was something else entirely. 3 years after landing, Sarah Chen stood in a field that had once been completely dead. Now it held rows of wheat, growing short and tough in the difficult soil, but growing nonetheless. The stalks were gold against the gray earth. It was not a large field, perhaps 2 hectares, but it was real. James walked up beside her. He was thinner now, like everyone, and there were new lines around his eyes. but he was smiling. "First real harvest," he said. "Not from hydroponics, real grain from real soil." Sarah reached down and touched one of the wheat stalks. It was rough and real under her fingers. Life, growing where nothing should grow. Proof that they had not come here to die. "Get the children," she said. "I want them to see this." A crowd gathered at the edge of the field. Children born on the ship who had only ever known metal walls. Children born on this world who had only known hydroponics tanks and artificial light. They had never seen wheat growing in open ground. "This is what we came here for," Sarah told them. "This is what your parents and grandparents dreamed about. A new home, a new beginning, and we're making it real." A little girl named Maya raised her hand. She was 5 years old, with dark hair like her mother and curious eyes that never stopped asking questions. "Captain Chen, can we eat it?" Sarah laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in months. The sound surprised her. "Yes, Maya, we can eat it. That's the whole point." The harvest festival that night was small but genuine. People danced to music played on instruments made from ship parts. They ate bread baked from their own wheat, mixed with vegetables from the greenhouses. They drank clean water that they had filtered and purified themselves. They celebrated not because their problems were over, but because they had proven something important. They could survive here. They could grow here. They could make this dead world live again. It would take time. It would take more sacrifice. Many of them would not live to see the final result, but for the first time since landing, they believed it was possible. Ambassador Kethril received the latest observation report and felt something he had not expected. He felt doubt about the Council's decision to ignore the human colonists. 3 years of struggle and they were still fighting. They had not asked for help. They had not demanded rescue. They had simply kept working. "Perhaps," he said to himself, "we underestimated them." But he did not share this thought with the Council. Not yet. He wanted to see what would happen next. He wanted to understand this strange species that planted seeds in dead soil and expected them to grow. The seeds that Earth had sent across the stars were doing more than growing crops. They were planting something much bigger. They were planting the idea that hope was not weakness, that persistence was not foolishness, that the power to change worlds lived in the hearts of those willing to try. The colonists of New Eden did not know any of this yet. They were too busy working, too busy growing, too busy building the future they had dreamed about for 300 years. But their time was coming, and when it arrived, the galaxy would never be the same. The second harvest was twice as large as the first. The third was larger still. The colonists had learned which crops worked and which did not. They had figured out how to treat the soil, how to filter the water, how to build shelters that could withstand the harsh weather. By the 5th year, they had a town. It was not a beautiful town. The buildings were made from cargo containers and local stone and recycled materials. The streets were packed dirt. The lighting was dim at night because they had to conserve power, but it had homes and a school and a medical center and a marketplace where people traded goods. They called it hope, because that was what they had brought with them across 300 light-years of empty space. That was what they had planted in dead soil and watered with their sweat. Hope was growing. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had become the most important person in the colony, though she would never admit it. Her work with soil restoration had saved them all. She had developed a process using engineered bacteria and careful mineral additions that could transform toxic dirt into something plants could survive in. It was slow work, treating 1 hectare at a time, but it was working. The key was understanding that we couldn't just remove the toxins, she explained to a group of young apprentices. We had to transform them, break them down into harmless compounds, lock them up in stable forms that wouldn't leach back into the water. "How long until the whole planet is habitable?" asked one of the students. Yuki smiled. 100 years, 200. It depends on how fast we can scale up the process. Each generation will have more to work with than the one before. That seems like a long time. It is a long time, but think about what we've already accomplished in 5 years. We have food, we have water, we have homes. Our grandparents thought they were sending us to paradise, and instead we found a wasteland. We're making paradise ourselves. Marcus Webb, the chief engineer, had his own miracles to report. His teams had built wind turbines from salvaged ship parts, generating power without burning the precious fuel reserves. They had constructed water treatment plants that could process thousands of liters per day. They had even started mining operations, carefully extracting useful materials without repeating the mistakes of the Velox. Everything they threw away we're using, Marcus explained to Sarah during one of her inspection tour. The Velox left behind mountains of slag and tailings. To them, it was worthless. To us, it's building material, trace minerals for the soil, raw materials for manufacturing. They were thinking about profit, Sarah said. We're thinking about survival. Different motivations lead to different results. The colony's population was growing too, not through new arrivals from Earth, but through births. The medical center delivered dozens of bobbies each year. Children were everywhere in hope, running through the streets, playing in the fields, attending school in buildings their parents had built. These children knew no other home. Earth was just a story to them, a blue marble in old photographs. New Eden was their world. The gray skis and challenging soil were normal to them. They did not see a ruined planet. They saw home. Maya Chen, the little girl who had asked if they could eat the wheat, was 10 years old now. She spent her days helping in the fields and her evenings studying with whatever books the colony's archives contained. Her grandmother, Captain Sarah Chen, watched her grow with quiet pride. "She reminds me of you," James Rivera said one evening. He was older now, his hair going gray, but he still served as Sarah's second-in-command. "How so?" "She never gives up. Last week she tried to grow tomatoes in an untreated soil patch, just to see what would happen." "Did they grow?" "No, they died within a week. So she took soil samples and spent 3 days figuring out why. Now she's designing a new treatment process specifically for tomatoes." Sarah smiled. "That's not stubbornness, that's the scientific method." "It's both. That's what makes humans special. We're stubborn enough to keep trying and smart enough to learn from our failures." The Dominion observers continued their vigil from orbit. Year after year, they documented the human progress. The reports grew longer and more detailed. The tone shifted from condescending amusement to grudging respect to something approaching wonder. "They have increased their cultivated land area by 400%, Vosna reported in the 10th year. Their population has grown by 25%. Their water treatment capacity exceeds their current needs, allowing them to stockpile reserves." "How is this possible?" asked a new member of the council, a young diplomat from a species that had just gained representation. "We do not know," Vosna admitted. "Our projections said they would exhaust their resources within 7 years. Instead, they have created new resources. They have turned waste into material, poison into nutrients, dead land into farms." Kethril had been waiting for this moment. He had been preparing his argument for years. "The humans have something we lack," he said. "They have persistence beyond reason. They have hope that defies logic. And they have a skill that we have never developed." "What skill?" Thipka demanded. "The skill of making broken things whole again, of healing what has been damaged, of restoration." The word hung in the air. Restoration. It was not a concept that the Dominion species valued. When something was broken, they replaced it. When a world was damaged, they abandoned it. The idea of fixing what was destroyed had never occurred to them. "Consider our own history," Kethril continued. "The Dominion controls 47 worlds that have been classified as uninhabitable due to environmental damage, worlds that we stripped and abandoned, worlds that we wrote off as worthless." Those worlds are worthless, Thipka insisted. The cost of restoration would exceed any possible benefit. Would it? Or have we simply never tried? The humans are showing us that restoration is possible, that damaged worlds can be healed. If their methods can be scaled up and applied to our abandoned colonies, the economic value would be enormous. The council debated for hours. Some members saw opportunity. Others saw only the humiliation of learning from a primitive species. In the end, they reached a compromise. They would continue observing. They would not interfere. But they would also not dismiss the humans as irrelevant. What happened on New Eden might have implications for the entire galaxy. By the 10th year, the colonists had spread across the planet. Small settlements dotted the landscape, connected by roads they had built themselves. The original 12,000 had become 15,000 through births and careful resource management. Children who had never known Earth ran through fields of grain and climbed trees that their parents had planted. Sarah Chen, now 72 years old and walking with the help of a cane, traveled between settlements to check on progress. Everywhere she went, she saw the same thing: green, life, growth. The gray world was slowly turning colors she had only seen in pictures from old Earth. At each settlement, people asked her the same question: when would they make contact with the other species? When would they join the galactic community? "When we're ready," Sarah always answered. "When we have something to offer." She did not know that they were already being watched. She did not know that their progress had become the subject of intense debate among the alien powers. She only knew that her people were surviving, and that was enough. The apple tree that she had watched struggle in the first year was now the center of a small orchard. 20 trees grew where one had almost died. Their fruit was small and tart, nothing like the apples of Earth, but the colonists loved them. Every harvest, people lined up to taste the fresh fruit, a luxury that reminded them of everything they had left behind and everything they were building anew. "We should call them Hope Apples," Maya suggested one day. She was 15 now, tall and serious, with her grandmother's determination in her eyes. "Why Hope Apples?" Sarah asked. "Because they grew when nothing should grow. Because they survived when everything said they should die. Because they're proof that we can make this world into something beautiful." Sarah looked at her granddaughter and saw the future of humanity. Not in the stars, but in the eyes of a child who believed that anything was possible. "Hope Apples it is," she said. The name spread through all the settlements within a month. Soon every orchard was called a Hope Grove. Every successful crop was grown with hope. Every child was taught that hope was what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. It was more than a name. It was an identity. It was who they had become. 20 years after landing, New Eden had transformed beyond recognition. The gray skies had begun to clear as the colonists planted millions of trees that slowly cleaned the atmosphere. The poisoned rivers now ran clean enough to swim in. The dead soil had become rich farmland that supported a population of 30,000 and growing. Sarah Chen did not live to see the transformation completed. She died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, surrounded by her family in the house that Marcus Webb had built for her in the center of Hope. The entire colony mourned her passing. Schools closed. Flags were lowered to half-mast. People gathered in the fields to share stories about the woman who had led them through the darkest years. Maya Chen, now 25 and one of the colony's leading agricultural scientists, delivered the eulogy. "My grandmother came here to build a new world," she said, standing before a crowd of thousands. "She didn't come to conquer. She didn't come to exploit. She came to plant seeds and watch them grow. That's what humans do. We find empty places and fill them with life. We find broken things and make them whole. We find hopeless situations and we hope anyway." She paused, looking out at the green fields that stretched to the horizon. Grandmother always said that the measure of a person wasn't what they took from the world, but what they left behind. Look around you. This is what she left behind. a living world where there was death, a thriving civilization where there was nothing, a future for all of us and for our children and for their children after them. The crowd was silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. We will honor her memory not with monuments but with growth. Every seed we plant, every tree we raise, every child we teach to love this world, that is her legacy. That is the legacy of every human who ever hoped for something better and worked to make it real. Maya stepped down from the platform and was immediately surrounded by family and friends. James Rivera, now an old man himself, took her hand. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said. "I know," Maya replied. "I intend to make her even prouder." The first contact came on a quiet afternoon in the 25th year of the colony. A shuttle descended from the sky and landed in a clearing near Hope. The colonists gathered to watch, uncertain whether to be afraid or excited. They had known for years that someone was watching them from orbit. They had seen the observation stations with their telescopes. They had detected the communication signals, but no one had ever come down to meet them. Ambassador Kethril stepped out of the shuttle alone. He had insisted on this. He wanted to meet the humans on their terms in their world. He was older now, his gray skin wrinkled with age, but his eyes were still sharp. Maya Chen walked forward to greet him. She had become the leader of the colony in all but name, the person people looked to for guidance and direction. "Welcome to New Eden," she said. "We've been expecting you." Kethril tilted his head. "You knew we were watching." "We suspected from the beginning. A species doesn't launch a colony ship without knowing who else is out there. We detected your observation stations within our first year. We've been waiting for you to make contact." "Why didn't you contact us first?" Maya smiled. It was her grandmother's smile, calm and confident. "Because we wanted to prove something first. We wanted to show you what we could do. Words are cheap. Results speak louder." Kethril looked around at the green fields, the growing trees, the clear stream that ran through the valley. All of it had been dead 25 years ago. He had seen the original surveys. He knew what this world had been. "How did you do this?" he asked. "Our scientists said it was impossible." "Your scientists measured the problem and concluded it couldn't be solved. Our scientists measured the problem and started working on solutions. The difference isn't intelligence, it's perspective." "What do you mean?" Maya began walking, and Kethril followed. They passed through fields of wheat and orchards of fruit trees. They saw children playing near a school building. They watched workers tending crops and maintaining equipment. "Your people see a damaged world and think waste," Maya explained. "My people see a damaged world and think opportunity. You measure the cost of restoration and decide it's too high. We measure the cost of giving up and decide that's higher." "Giving up has a cost." "Everything has a cost. When you abandon a broken world, you lose not just the resources on that world, but the knowledge you would have gained by fixing it. You lose the technology you would have developed. You lose the experience that would help you with the next challenge. Most importantly, you lose the belief that challenges can be overcome." Kethril was quiet for a long time, processing this new way of thinking. "Would you like to see our farms?" Maya asked. "Our laboratories, our water treatment facilities. I can show you everything. We have nothing to hide." "Yes," Kethril said. "I would like that very much." They walked for hours. Maya explained their techniques for soil restoration and water purification and sustainable agriculture. She showed him the bacteria cultures that broke down toxins. She demonstrated the filtration systems that turned poison into drinking water. She introduced him to the scientists and engineers and farmers who had made it all possible. Kethril asked hundreds of questions. He took notes. He recorded everything. And somewhere along the way, he realized something profound. The galaxy had been wrong about humanity. They were not primitives. They were not failures. They were not a young species playing at civilization. They were teachers. They had lessons that the stars needed to learn. "I must report to the council," he said finally, as the sun began to set over New Eden. The sky was orange and purple, colors that hadn't existed here 25 years ago. "What will you tell them?" Maya asked. "The truth, that humans have developed something the Dominion lacks, a technology of hope, a science of restoration, a way of thinking that transforms impossible problems into difficult but solvable ones." "And what do you think they'll do with that information?" Kethro looked at the sunset. He thought about the 47 dead worlds under Dominion control. He thought about the centuries of strip mining and exploitation. He thought about all the species that had given up on broken things instead of fixing them. "I think they will want to learn," he said. "I think they will have no choice." Maya nodded. She had been hopping for this answer. "We'll be ready to teach," she said. "That's what humans do. We share what we know. We help others grow. We believe that everyone can be better than they are." The partnership began slowly, as all great things do. Human experts traveled to damaged worlds across the Dominion, sharing their knowledge of environmental restoration. They brought seeds and bacteria and equipment. They brought patience and hope, and an unshakable belief that even the worst damage could be healed. In return, the aliens shared technology that helped the colonists advance faster than they could have alone, medical equipment that extended human lifespans, transportation systems that made travel between settlements easier, communication networks that connected all the human outposts into a single community. But the most important exchange was not practical, it was philosophical. The humans taught the galaxy that no world was truly dead, that with enough patience, enough work, enough hope, even the most damaged place could heal. They taught that the measure of a species was not how much it could take, but how much it could give. Other species began to change. Young Velox started questioning the mining practices that had devastated so many worlds. Nasari merchants invested in restoration projects instead of exploitation schemes. Even the proud, scaled warriors of Commander Vasna's species began planting gardens on their military bases. The seed of hope that humans had carried across the stars was spreading. It was taking root in alien hearts and alien minds. It was growing into something new and beautiful and impossible. 50 years after landing on New Eden, the planet had become one of the most beautiful worlds in known space. Forests covered the hills. Rivers ran clean and clear. Cities spread across the landscape, filled with humans and aliens living together in peace. Maya Chen, now 75 and the acknowledged matriarch of human civilization in the stars, stood where her grandmother had stood long ago and watched another sunrise. The sky was blue now, the clouds were white, everything was green and gold and alive. Birds sang in the trees, children laughed in the distance. The world was full of the sounds of life. She thought about the seeds that had traveled 300 light-years in a frozen ship. Seeds carried by people who refused to accept that hope was foolish. People who believed that even the darkest places could find light again. Those seeds had grown into more than crops. They had grown into a new kind of civilization, one that valued restoration over exploitation, one that saw damaged worlds not as failures but as opportunities, one that had changed the galaxy forever. Maya smiled and turned back toward home. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But that was all right. That was what humans did. They worked, they grew, they hoped. And they never, ever gave up. In the great halls of the Dominion Council, a statue now stood in the central chamber. It depicted a human hand holding a seed, with roots spreading downward and leaves reaching upward. At the base was a simple inscription that had been translated into every known language. They came with seeds and hope, and they changed worlds. Ambassador Kethril, now very old and nearing the end of his long life, visited the statue often. He liked to sit nearby and watch the young diplomats from 100 species walk past. Some stopped to read the inscription. Some touched the carved seed with reverent fingers. All of them knew the story. A human child came to visit one day, brought by her parents on a diplomatic tour. She was perhaps 7 years old, with curious eyes and restless energy. She stared at the statue for a long time. "What does it mean?" she asked. Kethril smiled. Even after 50 years, humans could still surprise him with their questions. "It means that your people taught us something important," he said. "It means that hope is not weakness, that persistence is not foolishness, that even the smallest seed can grow into something that changes the universe." The girl nodded seriously. "My mom says humans are stubborn." "Your mom is right, and that stubbornness is the most valuable thing your species possesses." "Why?" "Because the universe is full of problems that cannot be solved quickly or easily. Problems that make wise species give up. Problems that seem impossible. Your stubbornness lets you keep working on those problems until they stop being impossible." The girl thought about this for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a seed, brown and wrinkled, no bigger than her fingernail. "I found this in the garden this morning," she said. "I'm going to plant it when I get home." Kethril looked at the seed. It was such a small thing, such an ordinary thing, and yet it contained everything that made humans special. "Do you know what kind of plant it will become?" he asked. "No," the girl admitted, "but that's okay. I'll take care of it and find out." She put the seed back in her pocket and ran off to rejoin her parents. Kethril watched her go, feeling something he could not quite name. Pride, perhaps, or hope, or maybe just gratitude for having lived long enough to see the galaxy change. The statue gleamed in the light from 1,000 different suns. The inscription on its base had been read by billions of beings. But the true meaning of the monument was not in the carved stone or the written words. It was in the seed in a child's pocket. It was in the fields of green spreading across once dead worlds. It was in the hearts of every being who had learned to hope. Because when Earth sent colonists to the stars, they did not just carry seeds for plants. They carried the seed of an idea, the idea that nothing was impossible if you refused to stop trying, the idea that broken things could be healed, the idea that the universe was not something to be conquered, but something to be nurtured. That idea had taken root across the galaxy. It had grown in alien hearts and alien minds. It had spread from world to world, changing everything it touched. And it all started with 12,000 humans in a frozen ship, dreaming of a new home, bringing hope to the darkness between stars. This is how humanity made its mark on the universe. Not with weapons or conquest, but with patience and persistence, and an unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than today. This is the story that alien children would learn for thousands of years. The story of the species that refused to give up. The species that planted seeds in dead soil and made gardens grow. The species that taught the galaxy what it meant to hope. The species called human. And in gardens across 100 worlds, the seeds they brought were still growing, still spreading, still changing everything they touched. That was the true legacy of humanity. Not the cities they built or the technology they developed. Not the treaties they signed or the battles they won. Just seeds. Small and ordinary and full of infinite potential. Seeds and hope. That was all they brought. That was all they needed.